If Pokemon was rebooted, would it not be time for new battle mechanics? Did you know that the idea of Pokemon was inspired by the desire to collect insects? Satoshi Tajiri, one of the creators of Pokemon, did that when he was a child, and that aspect of collecting creatures is the heart and soul of Pokemon. And I find that the best parts of Pokemon is the collection, trade, and battling of them with friends. However, if you want to do that with a large online community, you had best be ready to grind. Grind to get Pokemon with the stats in the right places, grind against specific Pokemon so they grow as you want, grind to even find the ones that sparkle. This aspect of grinding is the least fun thing I can think of in a Pokemon game. I believe we can do better. I reckon we can design a battle and leveling system that attempts to mitigate the need to grind as much as possible. Of course, leveling Pokemon up over time is a type of grinding, but it's a fun one, so perhaps we can tweak how Pokemon advance and ensure that the less fun grinds are absent. This is one of the topics I've been most looking forward to talking about, and, well, be prepared for what will be the first among a few of the longer discussions I do. I have a lot to cover here, as I'm going to suggest an alternate design for the core mechanic for the entire game series. On top of that, I have to cover what Pokemon has done, why, and the space of potential I wish to explore. So let's diglet right in. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. That quote is from Soren Johnson, a game designer on the Civilization games. He was mostly talking about exploits that players take advantage of, but this concept also holds very true for systems based on luck with stats. You can see, or perhaps you have felt it yourself, that if you want a perfect team, you have to grind through lots of battles against specific opponents and catch lots of the same Pokemon until you get exactly what you want. I will put a disclaimer here that I am aware that not all players do this. There are lots of different playstyles of people who just want to catch and use what they deem is cool or cute, or they just go through with whatever they find until they beat the Elite Four, or they don't care about power, they just want to fill out the Pokédex. All are perfectly legitimate ways of playing, and I personally fit into a few of those playstyles. However, I believe one of the goals for Pokemon when Game Freak was designing the system was to make every Pokemon feel unique and special to the player. When you catch a Pidgey, that is your Pidgey. No one else has this one. Give it a name, even. As you train it and it grows in power, they wanted that growth to feel organic, a small element of it to feel unpredictable. One of the ways they have gone about this idea is through stat manipulation, or, in other words, increasing numbers as they gain levels. All Pokemon have stats in the form of hit points, HP, attack, physical damage, special attack, elemental-ish damage, defense, special defense, and speed. Elements affecting these stats within a given Pokemon are individual values, IVs, effort values, EVs, and natures, introduced in Gen 3. Individual values are the stats randomly rolled within a certain range for a Pokemon when they spawn. Natures provide a 10% bonus growth to one stat and a 10% deduction to another. The combination of those two means most Pokemon you come across are rather unique. The problem with this, however, is that it becomes a way for people to disassociate them into what is ideal, preferred, or statistically perfect, and what is not worth their time. People are incentivized to simply throw away what is less powerful because they caught a Pokemon that didn't roll the stats and natures that fits perfectly for what they are after. Now, effort values somewhat mitigate this, but they have problems of their own. Effort values are the bonuses Pokemon receive to their stats for defeating specific other Pokemon in battle. For example, defeating lots of Oddish will reward a Pokemon with extra stat points towards its special attack, in addition to what it would gain normally when it levels up. These extra points can help boost whatever stat a player wants to encourage. This can give the feeling that the Pokemon are growing organically, and is the main reason a Pokemon leveling up from a low level would be more powerful than a wild one of the same level later on. The problem might be pretty obvious here, however. This system encourages grinding against whatever Pokemon would be best to fight so as to optimally level your team. When you think about it, these mechanics are a very simple and efficient way to simulate growth. It is manageable in a way that makes balancing the power scales very accessible to the designers and programmers. This was very important for a console as limiting as the Game Boy back in the 90s. Having stats and increasing numbers has existed since before Dungeons and Dragons, so it made a perfect fit back then. This issue of grinding is exactly what I want to address in this video. We've only looked at one aspect to the battle mechanics and we can already see two categories of grinding. One for catching and breeding for ideal stats, the other for battling specific enemies to control specific growth. Over time, Game Freak has provided some options to lessen these issues, but it is still a time sink no matter how you look at it. Personally, I don't believe that grinding is the soul of Pokemon's gameplay, thus I would like to remove the temptations. And yes, I am aware that some people enjoy grinding, but this is my design study, and these are the design parameters I've chosen to tackle. Don't worry, I'll leave a treat for you at the end. So, having talked about the mechanics of the Pokemon that we could revise, now let's talk about how we could revise the battle system. First, there is the type chart element system, which works like an advanced form of scissors, paper, rock. I don't want to fundamentally change this system because I believe it is one of the most core parts of the Pokemon franchise. To chop and change this would be like questioning if we want to battle with pocket monsters, so I'll come back to that another day. Next, we can talk about how the battle system works. This is a strategy game of picking moves to use against your opponent one turn at a time. This mechanic is actually a little bit of a byproduct of the Game Boy hardware limitation. They had limited screen space to convey a lot of information through. They wanted you to see the creatures you are battling with and against, have these element-based moves used with unique animations, not to mention selecting those moves, all while having an extremely limited amount of memory to work with. Not that I'm suggesting a change to the turn-based mechanic. Like the type chart, I believe the turn-based strategy of selecting moves is another fundamental mechanic to Pokemon's design, and should remain as such. I also like the idea of keeping it turn-based because you can take your time with it. It has an element of accessibility to it. You don't need fast reflexes with a controller in order to keep up with the game. Another byproduct of the hardware was the limit of having only 4 moves to pick from. You couldn't fit a large selection of options on the screen without making scrolling through a list a cumbersome and an annoying task for the player. Have you seen the Pokemon storage box in Gen 1 and 2? They were so slow to organize. Imagine having to pick moves like this on the Game Boy. There isn't enough screen space to remind you of what they all do. In fact, the text box at the bottom of the screen could only fit 4 options, and that was just their names. If we had a big list of just the names of the moves, new players would quickly forget what all the moves did or how they could be useful. However, the extra amount of pixels from consoles these days gives us plenty of room to not just give a list, but give statistical details as well. There might even be an argument to be made about how much information they needed to spare in memory for the hundreds of Pokemon you collect. Their name, stats, and only 4 moves might have just fit in tightly, while adding any more than that could have been too much for the cartridge. On the other hand, the positive side of having only 4 moves is that it encourages the player to use strategy when building their team. This is fun, and it served its purpose well. However, after 8 generations, let's look at what we could change here. So the questions to ask ourselves are, what could be done to address these issues now that there aren't those hardware limitations? And to keep our design brief, what limitations should we conform to? Firstly, we still want to make Pokemon feel unique and to grow as such. Secondly, we want a Pokemon you train and keep with you to be more powerful than one found in the wild of the same level. Thirdly, when designing to meet those 2 points, we avoid the possibility of grinding wherever possible in the hope for players to not default to gaming the system and optimizing the fun out of it. Of course, if you breed a new Pokemon, it'll take a bit to get up some levels, but it shouldn't matter too much about how any of them start out. This is your Pidgey. You help it realize its full potential. The 3 levels. The idea I would like to propose is to take the largest elements of a Pokemon leveling up and to have the moves a Pokemon learn be what grows in power. Have the moves level up. Not to an extreme like letting a move get to level 100, just to 3, a 3-tier system that I'm going to call the 3-star system, because who doesn't like stars? Game Freak seems to like them. Alongside this, Pokemon no longer forget moves. They won't be restricted to knowing only 4 moves at a time. This obviously changes the strategies you are familiar with quite a bit, but allow me to break it down. Let's say we remove most of the stats from the Pokemon entirely. Speed, attack, special attack, individual values, and effort values gone. Pokemon can still level up to 100, mind you, and we keep HP. Having their health or hit points increase as they level up is a good way to have Pokemon become more powerful over time. The defense stats of Pokemon I would like to keep, but in a different form such as the 3-star system, which I'll go into detail later. The rest of them I would like to either erase or hand over to the moves and abilities themselves. The speed of a move firing off in a turn and the amount of damage it does can be handled on their end. Training tokens. Okay, imagine this. You defeat a trainer NPC with your Pidgey. Let's call her Athena. Athena levels up to level 8, gains some HP, and you get 1 training token to spend. Also, Athena learns the move Sand Attack. You are taken to her move menu, and you can see that at the first level, 1 star, it lowers the target's accuracy a little bit. Useful in this early stage of the game. At 2 stars, it lowers accuracy even more and becomes an area of effect instead of a targeted move, helpful for those team battles. At 3 stars, it lowers accuracy by a decent percentage and does a small amount of damage on top. Maybe it starts with no stars and needs at least 1 token invested for it to be usable. However, you are only 2 tokens away from getting Gust up to its 2nd star level, where it gains a chance to confuse the opponent. What do you want to invest in? And for clarity, the amount of tokens needed to go from the 1st star to the 2nd is probably much smaller than the amount of tokens needed for the 2nd star to get to the 3rd. And my first tangent of many here, for good measure, to help the transition from one level to the next not feel empty, moves might start with a smaller amount of damage or chance of something working. Investing tokens towards the next level might increase those numbers. This is something to be balanced and may not work for all moves, but it is something of value to prototype and playtest. More powerful versions already exist. We already have moves in Pokemon that are essentially the same but are more powerful. What if they simply upgraded into each other? Thundershock into Thunderbolt into Thunder, Ember into Flamethrower into Fire Blast. Of course, the amount of times you can use any move, or power points as they are now in the game, would be something to balance, but you understand what I'm getting at here. Still learning at higher levels. More powerful moves could be learned at higher levels still, though that would mean that fewer tokens are available with the level cap approaching. I would find this an interesting challenge to decide what to invest where for my last precious batch of tokens. Investment over time. Since it would take an increasing number of training tokens between each star level, in addition to them learning new moves as they level up, you have to decide what you want to invest those tokens in. To keep it balanced, at level 100, a Pokemon would only have enough tokens to max out a handful of moves, and at the sacrifice of a number of others. The feeling I'm going for here is that the effort of investing tokens into a move to get that powerful payoff feels like you have been training it to get better at something. One option that could be put here is that using a move often would lower the cost of tokens needed to rank it up. This would require heavy testing and balancing before implementation, but it would be interesting if it worked. Or it could devolve into grinding again, so perhaps not. Diverse or min-max. This allows players to do some strategizing with their resources. They can spread tokens around to have access to a lot of different moves, or they could do what is known as min-maxing by investing strongly in just a few moves, leaving the others completely empty. The difference between 2 of the same Pokemon on your team would be how you went about investing training tokens. One might not have any fully powered moves, but it has a large variety and perhaps covers multiple type advantages. The other might be specifically geared towards hitting very hard with powerful payoffs. Also, min-maxing might have another trade-off due to the more powerful versions of moves having less power points to use than their lower star level versions, which is exactly how the games play now. You don't want to run out of moves in a drawn-out fight. Point redistribution. An issue with this system for the keen-eyed designer would be, what if you change your mind about what you want to invest in halfway through? And I have two solutions available for this. One or even both could be implemented. The first one is, for every level in which you gain one training token, you can also redistribute one from another move. This is somewhat like how a dog might forget how to do a trick over time because it's been a while since you last did it. The second idea is re-rolling stats. Perhaps there is an NPC in the game that will let you, for a sizable fee, redistribute 15 or so tokens for a Pokemon. Perhaps you can only do this once or twice per Pokemon. Maybe more than one NPC like this exists and they do different amount of tokens for different prices. Better raised than wild. Pokemon in the wild will always have their training tokens distributed randomly and almost never have a fully powered move. Again, the option to redistribute tokens helps against undesired setups here, but ideally this should naturally have wild Pokemon less powerful than what you would have raised yourself. However, maybe we can tweak and emphasize this further. Perhaps every 5 levels you've had it gains an extra bonus token. Or, more interestingly, fulfilling certain requirements or achievements for a Pokemon might grant those extra tokens. For example, Athena defeated 10 Pokemon it has a type advantage over, and as its reward, gains a token for the achievement. Taking X number of hits that it is weak to, gaining the final blow on a Pokemon of the same level or higher than it, enter 50 battles with the trainer. I could go on and on. The idea is that these are things that would help you feel like you are giving your Pokemon experience and training it just wouldn't get by itself. Items we've seen before like iron, calcium, and zinc are of course welcome additions here too. They are used to permanently increase particular stats of Pokemon, so perhaps they could contribute to fulfilling certain achievement points a little faster. Passives. I have just one more idea to introduce about this system before I get back to how this all could tie into those stats I got rid of. With this system, we have a very interesting option available to us, since Pokemon now don't forget moves. Passive abilities. Moves that you don't select in battle, but which grant permanent buffs to your Pokemon that you could also level up 3 tiers. There could be a bug-type Pokemon or two that have a passive available, granting them increasing resistance to fire attacks. How about a buff to damage dealt when up against something it has a type advantage or disadvantage to? Bonuses to health points. What if there was a passive that could increase the speed of the moves that are of the same type as the Pokemon using it? Now consider the large variety that could be designed to debuff the opposing team. The goal with passives being to, again, increase the strategies available not just between different Pokemon, but also what a few of the same Pokemon could achieve. For those of you who are perhaps thinking it was a bit silly for one Pokemon to have so many combat moves available to it, can feel more at ease now, because a chunk of the move list a Pokemon learns over time is not meant to be selected during combat. Some of them are now always on and working for you. Also, what if achievements unlocked moves? Have a grass type fight enough fire types and it will unlock access to the passive buff for resisting fire that you could now invest in. Of course, there would be limits implemented. Not all grass Pokemon could do this, for example, just a special few. All species of Pokemon would have their own list of abilities they can learn, just like how the games are right now. Technical machines in the Pokemon games are used to teach moves to Pokemon they might not otherwise ever learn themselves. Perhaps now they are simply shortcuts past these unique or hidden achievements. The stats. Okay, so now let's get back to how the battle system might work. I'm sure a number of you have been screaming for the last while, but without stats, fast Pokemon can't be fast, tanks can't be tanks, heavy hitters won't hit as hard. And that's not necessarily true, but it's a valid concern, so let's go over it. I mentioned that speed and attack power can be handled by moves alone, and I said that defense and special defense would also be a 3-tier system attached to the Pokemon. Attack. In the first generation through to the third, whether a move is an attack or special attack type was based on the element type it was using. That changed from the 4th generation onwards to each individual move determining what stat affects its strength. The basic idea behind it is that if an attack is physical, such as a punch to the face, it uses attack. If a move seems more elemental or magical, such as eating your dreams while you sleep, it uses special attack. Additionally, each offensive move has a number that is its base attack power. I see no reason to change any of that now. Typically, a Pokemon's stats would be added to the damage calculations, hence higher stats equals more damage. But since I'm removing those numbers, I would change that to the Pokemon's level being what is added to the equation. So higher level Pokemon would naturally be stronger than lower level ones. However, this means that there is a much greater dependency on elemental type advantages if you want to win the fight. Now, to reiterate, outside of elemental type advantages, attack and special attack still exist as tags on the moves and play an important role in offensive strategy. Although Pokemon themselves don't have attack and special attack, the tags on the moves will be compared to an opponent Pokemon's defense. So, with that in mind, now looking at those defense stats I turned into a 3-star system, I think it would be interesting if the tier they had in defense and special defense was purely determined by the species of the Pokemon and what stage of evolution they are at. Leveling them up wouldn't change or improve either defense stat, only evolution does. Although we could have a passive ability be available to do it as well. All Rhyhorns would have a 3-star defense stat, but no stars in special defense. Evolve it into Rhydon and it gains 1 star in special defense. Maybe with a reboot we could swap those names. This is all sounding pretty familiar so far, right? Anyone accustomed to fighting a Blissey would expect a high special defense and pretty poor defense. Not much in the concept is changing here. What is changing is how higher defense stars would take out bigger percentage chunks from the incoming attacks. 1-star defense could lower the incoming attack by 10%, 3 stars might do 50%. And all this comes into effect before elemental type advantages. All these things combined might mean that Pokemon of even quite a few levels lower could defeat something higher level thanks to elemental advantages, and possibly min-maxing their strongest move. This should keep players on their toes even against wild Pokemon. As I mentioned earlier, health points remain attached to a Pokemon's leveling and would hopefully let them feel like they are indeed getting tougher over time, even if their basic defense stats remain unchanged. With attack and defense set up like this, going into a fight with a strategy should be more rewarding than just powering through. A Pokemon with lots of moves in its repertoire, despite them not being very powerful, is just as viable as min-maxing. Speed. Finally, the speed of a move could come in categories: slow, medium, fast, very fast, and very slow, etc. Basically, when the player has selected a move, the move's speed is compared to the opponent's to see in what order they fire off in. So, as I'm sure you can see, part of the battle strategy of picking your moves, from which you have quite a few now, could involve how desperate you are to make sure that you go first. We can actually see this system in play in the online multiplayer Pokemon clone Temtem. The Temtem creatures all have the familiar stats like attack, special attack, defense, speed, etc. However, all the moves have different levels of priority that places a multiplier onto your speed stat to determine who goes first. The result of a low priority move would use half of the Temtem's speed and would therefore likely go last in turn order. Of course, we are trying to remove stats entirely, but I love that we have a system that shows this idea in action. Additionally, in the mainline games, any speed tie is determined by a random roll of who goes first. This could be fine here too. It would just mean it happens a bit more often. Another quick idea: what if moves resolved at the same time on a speed tie? Both Pokemon take damage at the same time, sometimes resulting in dual fainting. Yes, this could very much lead to the last Pokemon on each team getting taken out at the same time, resulting in an unsatisfactory draw. Hence why this is just a tangent and a pause screen. I don't have a perfect solution, someone out there does, but I want to just take a moment to put forward the question anyway. What if, as a result of a speed tie, the moves clashed, something unique happens, maybe conflicting elements cancel each other out, or explode? I think this could be worth exploring. Anyway, to make a Pokemon that should be fast like Rapidash actually feel fast, the moves available to it could simply be geared towards that ideal. It has a lot of moves that tend towards the fast category. Also a passive buff, that is an option too. Alternatively, or more likely additionally, We could have a 3-star system for speed tied to the species of Pokemon, just like defense is. These stars add their bonus onto the speed of a selected move. A Slowpoke with 0 speed stars using a very fast move might not even beat a 3-star speed Pokemon using a slow move. Whew! Okay, so now that we have all the cogs in this machine in mind, I have just a few final notes before signing off. Legendary Pokemon. Legendaries are always encountered at the same high level, so they could have training tokens equal to that as if they were raised from level 1. Additionally, if all the tokens are predetermined in distribution instead of randomly dispersed like wild Pokemon, or maybe a few predetermined setups that are randomly picked from when encountered, they should feel significantly more powerful than other wild Pokemon of the same level. They would truly feel like a worthy foe and a well-earned catch. Evolution limits. The main reason Pokemon never have a 4th evolution is because the boost to a Pokemon's stats when evolving would be too high and overpowered to do 3 times over. Without stats being a strong factor anymore, this could be worth reconsidering. Shiny Pokemon. Notice how there hasn't been a section on shiny Pokemon in this topic of anti-grinding? Like I said at the start, I recognize that people like doing that. I know there are a fair amount of people who would hate this idea of removing stats because they enjoy putting in the effort of repeatedly fighting specific Pokemon and catching or breeding endlessly to get the stats they are after. So in answer to that, my treat for you is to leave the shiny Pokemon mechanic alone as it is. They would still be out there, still very difficult to find, and super awesome to have. Good luck to you. Training limitations. One last thing I wanted to mention is that with a reboot, you can also rewrite some of the rules we have come to expect in the Pokemon games. Right now, if you catch a Pokemon yourself, it will obey you no matter what level you raise it to, even if you have no badges. Getting badges means that Pokemon you get in trades will listen to you at higher levels. This is to prevent a player from being handed a level 100 Mewtwo by a friend of theirs at the first Pokemon Center and just cheat the game. Not surprisingly, a lot of people think it is just any Pokemon they have that will stop listening to them if they go too high in level. I thought this was the case for years, and honestly, it's probably Ash's Charizard to blame for that. So perhaps this should indeed be the case. In Sword and Shield, we were finally given an open area for us to explore with even some scary high-level Pokemon roaming around. To limit the player, a new rule was introduced which prevents them from catching anything too high level too early. So you could even catch something low level and raise it to higher than the ones you can find, but not be able to catch because you don't have a badge. Personally, I think it would be so much cleaner if it was just simply that they wouldn't listen to you and you can just box them away for later if you happen to get extremely lucky. If a player gets all their Pokemon too high in level, they can still progress in the game. It just means that the higher the level, the less and less likely it will take commands. And you can always catch something lower level too, so there's that. Alright, that's it for now. This whole discussion came about as I first asked myself the question, what if we removed the 4-move limit? After a while of digesting the idea, I also asked the question about whether the stats needed to be there at all. So now I will propose some questions to you. Since we are no longer under such limiting hardware and software restraint that we had for the Game Boy, what kind of battle mechanics or game genres do you feel might work for Pokemon? It could be just an idea for a spin-off series. Of course, I'm also interested in what other people might do under the same design restraints. Remember that I mentioned Game Freak wanted to make every Pokemon feel unique and special to the player, power growth to feel organic, and maybe a small element of it to feel unpredictable. Are there other games or franchises that have accomplished this for you? Thank you all for watching. Please press the like button, hit the bell awesome to get notified when a new video comes out, and as always, if you want to make my Wooloo happy, don't leave this video without subscribing. She gets very sad when people do that. It makes her cry. Continue to be wonderful to each other, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty, since this episode, and episode 3, took a lot of research, I really think I should thank Bulbapedia at the end here. A super big thank you to all the people who manage that website and community. It is such an invaluable resource of detailed information on everything Pokemon, and my video series is so much better for it. Really phenomenal work, you should all be very proud of what you have built here. Thank you.